Poor twins enter an abandoned market looking for food, but find a billionaire tied up in the basement. What happens next is unbelievable. The sky looked like a grey blanket over the city that morning. Juniper adjusted the sock slipping from her torn sneaker, while Maisie counted the coins they'd found under the couch. 3 cents. They wouldn't buy anything, but the twins kept them anyway in the pocket of the coat they shared on alternate days. "I think Mom is still asleep," Juniper whispered, her brown hair falling over her eyes. Both had the same face, the same big honey-colored eyes. But Juniper had a small birthmark near her right ear. Nina had cried all night. The girls listened, huddled under the only blanket left in the small house they lived in. The eviction notice had been on the kitchen table for 3 days. The utility bills formed a pile that Nina stared at with empty eyes every morning. "Let's go," Maisie said, more determined than her sister, "before she wakes up." The twins knew the way. It wasn't the first time they had gone out alone to find something to eat. Nina didn't know about these outings, or maybe she did, and pretended not to, because the shame of not being able to feed her daughters weighed more than anything. The old market was 6 blocks from their house. It had closed almost a year ago when the owner died and no one wanted to take over the business. People said the place was haunted. For Juniper and Maisie, it was just a place where they sometimes found boxes of forgotten fruit or bread that no one had taken. "It's colder today," Juniper commented, hugging herself as they walked along the broken sidewalk. The small town seemed emptier on cloudy days. "Yeah, but at least it's not raining," Maisie replied, always looking for something good in every situation. "Look, a coin." She bent down to pick up a dirty coin from between the cracks in the asphalt. 4 cents now. The market appeared on the corner, with its broken windows and the back door ajar. The girls knew how to get in without making a sound. They knew every corner, every empty shelf, every sound the place made when the wind blew through the cracks. "Let's check the storage room first," Maisie suggested. The storage room was where they usually found cardboard boxes with slightly bruised apples or potatoes that were still good to eat. But that day it was empty. Not even the boxes were there. "Maybe in the front," Juniper said, trying not to sound disappointed. The two walked through the dark hallway, their footsteps echoing faintly. That's when they heard it. A low sound, like a groan. The twins stopped, holding each other's hands. "What was that?" Juniper asked, her voice barely audible. "It came from there." Maisie pointed to a door they had never opened before. It was a heavy metal door that led to the basement. The girls knew the basement existed, but they had never gone down there. It felt different this time, as if something was calling them. "What if it's an injured dog?" Maisie suggested. Both loved animals, although Nina never allowed them to have one. "We don't even have money to feed you," she would say. "Let's take a look," Juniper agreed. The door opened with a creak that seemed too loud in the silence of the market. A concrete staircase descended into darkness. There was a strange smell of dampness and something else the girls didn't recognize. "It's too dark." Juniper hesitated. Maisie pulled a small flashlight from her pocket that she had found weeks ago in the trash near their house. It worked sometimes when the nearly dead batteries got a last burst of life. She tapped the flashlight against her palm a few times until a weak beam of light appeared. "Come on," she called, descending the first step. The stairs seemed endless for such small legs. 17 steps. Juniper counted in silence. On the last one, the flashlight flickered 3 times and died. "Darn it," Maisie muttered. But by now their eyes had adjusted somewhat. There was a sliver of light coming through a tiny window high on the wall, enough to see they weren't alone. In the farthest corner of the basement, tied to a pipe with thick ropes, was a man. His face had dark spots that the girls recognized as dried blood. His clothes, which must have been expensive once, were torn and dirty. His eyes, when they opened at the sound of the children's footsteps, showed as much fear as surprise. The twins stopped, unsure of what to do. Should they run, call someone? The man looked sick and weak. He didn't move much, just watched the two with an expression that changed from fright to something like supplication. "Water," he said, his voice so hoarse it barely came out. "Please." Juniper and Maisie exchanged glances. Even at 5 years old, they understood the basics of right and wrong. They knew the man shouldn't be there, tied up like that. People shouldn't be tied up. "I'll go get some," Maisie said, returning to the stairs. Juniper stayed, keeping her distance, but unable to look away from the man. He looked as lonely as they sometimes felt. Maisie returned minutes later with a half-crushed plastic bottle she had found in the trash near the entrance. She had filled it with water from the back faucet, the only one still working in the market. Carefully, the two approached. The man made no sudden movements, perhaps from weakness, perhaps from fear of scaring them. "Thank you," he murmured as Maisie tilted the bottle to his cracked lips. As he drank, Juniper noticed that the ropes on his wrists had left red marks and wounds. It looked painful. "Who did this to you?" she asked, her small voice echoing in the empty basement. The man shook his head slightly. "It doesn't matter now," he replied. "You shouldn't be here, E. It's dangerous. We're looking for food," Maisie explained with the direct honesty of children. "Mom doesn't have a job and we're hungry." Something in the man's eyes changed. A shadow of sadness passed over his thin, bruised face. "I have this," Juniper said, pulling a crumpled package with half a cereal bar from her pocket that she had saved from the day before when a kind neighbor had given it to her. She was saving it to share with Maisie later, but now it seemed more important to offer it to the man. "No, he didn't," he refused, seeming surprised. "Dice, you need it more than I do," but the twins insisted, placing the small package next to him. "What are your names?" the man asked, his voice a little stronger after the water. "I'm Juniper," replied the girl with the birthmark, "and she's Maisie. We're twins." "I noticed," he said, with what almost seemed like a smile. My name is Ellis." "Why are you here, Ellis?" Maisie asked. Ellis closed his eyes for a moment. "Some people did something bad," he replied simply. The girls nodded as if they understood completely, though they understood nothing beyond the fact that the man was injured and needed help. "We'll come back tomorrow," Juniper promised. "We'll bring more water. And food, if we can get it," Maisie added. Ellis looked at the two with an expression they couldn't define. It seemed like gratitude, mixed with something deeper, something like Nina's look when she hugged them at night, saying everything would be okay, even when everyone knew it wouldn't be. "You are very brave," Ellis said. "But you have to promise not to tell anyone you saw me. The people who left me here are dangerous." The twins promised with all the seriousness of their 5 years. When they left the basement, the sky was still grey, but somehow it seemed less heavy. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Juniper asked as they walked back home. Maisie took her sister's hand. "I will take care of him," she replied with the certainty only children possess. "He has no one, like us." The little guardians walked down the empty street, with a new secret and a new purpose. The next morning, Juniper woke up before the sun rose. On the other side of the small, worn bed, Maisie's eyes were already open, as if the two had agreed without words. "Do you think he's still there?" Juniper whispered. Maisie nodded. "We have to bring more water." The twins slid out of bed carefully to avoid making noise. Nina slept on the living room sofa, exhausted after another night searching for jobs online on her old phone until the battery died. Juniper grabbed a cloth from the kitchen drawer while Maisie filled a bottle with tap water. They found a piece of stale bread in the nearly empty pantry and divided it into 3 unequal parts. The largest would be for Ellis. "And this," Maisie said, pulling an old faded blanket from under the bed that Nina no longer used. He looked cold. The blanket was heavy for their small arms, but they took turns carrying it on the way to the abandoned market. The sky was beginning to lighten when they arrived, and the city was still asleep. The back door was still ajar, as if waiting for them. They went down the basement stairs slowly, more confident than the day before. "Ellis?" Juniper called softly. He was there in the same position, but his eyes opened faster this time. He seemed surprised to see them again. "You really came back," he said, his voice still hoarse, but a little firmer. "We brought water," Maisie said, approaching to help him drink. "And bread. And a blanket," Juniper added, unfolding the old fabric and covering the man's legs. Ellis looked at the blanket and then at the girls. His eyes shone differently. "You shouldn't risk yourselves for me," he said. "It's not a risk," Maisie replied, shrugging. So nobody comes here. You need it more than us, Juniper explained, repeating something she had heard Nina say when she shared the little food they had with an elderly neighbor. The twins sat on the basement floor, watching Ellis eat the piece of bread slowly, as if savoring every crumb. Neither of them asked why he was there, or who had hurt him. For 5-year-old children, the present moment was what mattered. Do you live near here? Ellis asked. 6 blocks, Maisie replied. In the small blue house. With Mom, Juniper added. She's sad because she doesn't have a job. Ellis nodded as if he understood perfectly. And your dad? The twins exchanged glances. He left, Juniper said. Before we remembered him, Maisie added. A silence fell upon the three. Ellis closed his eyes for a moment. I need you to help me with something, he said finally. Can you try to loosen these ropes? They're hurting my wrists. The girls approached. The ropes were thick and tied tightly, but after several minutes of trying, they managed to loosen them a bit. Not enough to free Ellis, but enough to relieve the pressure on his injured wrists. Thank you, he whispered. That helps a lot. Juniper noticed his hands trembling. Without a word, she took the cloth she had brought, wet it with some water, and gently wiped the dried blood from Ellis's face. He closed his eyes, letting the girl take care of him with those simple, pure gestures. We have to go, Maisie said, looking at the sliver of light coming through the window. Mom will wake up. We'll be back tomorrow, Juniper promised. Ellis nodded. Be careful on your way. The visits became part of the twins' routine. Every morning, they woke up early and slipped out of the house without making a sound. They always brought water and whatever food they could gather, half an apple, a packet of cookies someone had given them, leftovers from the little Nina managed to put on the table. On the 3rd day, they found Ellis more alert, sitting more upright against the wall. I managed to get some sleep, he explained. Did the blanket help? Juniper asked. Ellis smiled, a small but real smile. It helped a lot. As the days passed, the girls began to tell him more about their lives. They sat near Ellis and talked about the small house they lived in, about how they had to take cold showers when the bill wasn't paid, about the nights when Nina cried, thinking they were already asleep. Yesterday the landlord came again, Maisie said one morning, dividing an orange into segments. Mom was trembling after he left. She said we'll have to move if she doesn't pay soon, Juniper added, passing a segment to Ellis, but we don't know where to. Ellis listened in silence, his eyes attentive. He never interrupted, never said everything would be fine. He just listened, as if the worries of 2 5-year-old children were as important as any problem in the adult world. And the refrigerator makes a weird noise, Maisie continued. Mom said it's going to stop working soon. In winter, it will be difficult without a heater, Juniper said. Ours broke last year. Ellis would sometimes ask for details. What the house was like, what the neighborhood was like, what the girls liked to do when they weren't helping their mother or looking for food. Simple questions that made the twins feel heard. Important. On the 5th day, they noticed he had managed to loosen the ropes even more. His wrists were still sore, but he could move them a little. It's getting better, Juniper commented, wiping the wet cloth on his wounds. Ellis nodded. In thanks to you. The girls didn't notice the changes in themselves, how they now looked around before entering the market, how they had developed a system for dividing food into 3 parts whenever they got something, how Juniper kept any clean cloth she found in her pockets, how Maisie had learned to loosen the ropes without hurting Ellis further. One morning, they arrived and found Ellis standing, still tied to the pipe ends, but able to stand for a few minutes. I'm getting stronger, he said. The girls clapped, as if it were a magic trick. Ellis smiled, freer now, less scared. On our street, there's a lady who sometimes gives us cookies, Maisie said, sitting next to him. But she doesn't have much either. And Mr. Joe from the convenience store lets us take overripe fruit, Juniper added. He says he was going to throw it away anyway. Are people good to you? Ellis asked. The twins pondered. Some are, Maisie replied. Others pretend they don't see us. Or look at Mom with sad faces, Juniper said. She doesn't like that, Ellis nodded. Sometimes it's hard to accept help. Like you, Maisie asked, always direct. Ellis smiled. Yes, like me. But I've learned that sometimes we need to accept. Why don't you tell your mum about me? He asked after several days. Maisie and Juniper exchanged glances. She'd worry, Juniper explained. And maybe she wouldn't let us come anymore, Maisie added. Ellis nodded in understanding. You two are very special. You know that? The twins shrugged, not fully understanding what was so special about helping someone in need. For them, it was just that simple. On a rainy morning, almost 2 weeks after their first encounter, the girls arrived soaked in the basement. They had walked in the rain, shielding the bread and piece of cheese they carried with their bodies. You're wet, Ellis exclaimed, concerned. It's okay, Maisie said, shaking her hair like a puppy. Come here, Ellis called, opening the blanket he now used as a cloak. The twins approached, and he wrapped them in the old fabric, using his own body heat to warm them. Last night our room leaked, Juniper recounted, snuggled under the blanket. Mum put buckets, but the mattress still got wet. And she had to miss a job interview because she didn't have money for the bus, Maisie said, her voice low. Ellis listened attentively. He didn't offer magical solutions or empty promises. He just listened, letting the girls speak of their small and large fears. They talked about the time Nina fainted from exhaustion, the day they had to share one sandwich between the three of them, the night they were without electricity for a week. Thank you, Ellis said after a while, for saving me. The twins didn't answer. They didn't fully understand what it meant to save someone. They only knew that Ellis was better now, that his eyes had a different sparkle, that his face was no longer so pale, that he could smile. I want to tell you something, Ellis said, his voice soft. When I get out of here, and I will get out one day, I will never forget what you did for me. Promise, Juniper asked. I promise, Ellis replied. And there was something in his voice that made the girls believe him without a doubt. When they returned home that day, Nina asked why they were wet. We went to see the ducks at the pond, Maisie lied. It was the first time they had lied to their mother, and both felt a pang in their chests. But Ellis's secret was more important. Night after night, before going to sleep, the twins whispered about Ellis, planning what they would bring the next day, imagining what it would be like when he was completely well. Will he be able to visit us? Juniper asked one night. Of course, Maisie replied with the unwavering certainty of children. We're friends now. And they were. In the silence of the dark basement, between water, shared bread, and shared stories, a bond had formed. A bond made of small gestures, of tiny hands cleaning wounds, of simple words carrying worries too big for such small children, of attentive eyes that listened without judgment. A bond that, without any of them knowing yet, would change their lives forever. The morning was clear when the twins left home. The sky had a different blue, as if it had been washed by the rain from the night before. Juniper and Maisie carried a plastic bag with a piece of cake that a neighbor had given Nina. It was his birthday, and the girls were eager to share this rarity with Ellis. He'll like it, Juniper said, holding the bag carefully. It's chocolate. We've never brought him something so delicious, Maisie agreed, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. The path to the abandoned market was already etched in their small feet. 6 blocks, turn left at the big tree, past the broken fire hydrant. And there was the grey building with its empty windows like lifeless eyes. The girls entered through the back door, as always. The silence inside the place seemed heavier that morning, but they didn't notice. They were busy imagining Ellis's expression when he saw the cake. He'll think it's our birthday, Maisie giggled. They went down the basement stairs, their steps echoing on the concrete. The faint light coming through the small window high on the wall was enough to illuminate the now familiar space. Ellis? Juniper called softly, her joyful voice bouncing off the walls. We brought a surprise. Silence. Ellis? Maisie tried, a little louder. The twins stopped on the last step. The basement was empty. The pipe where Ellis had been tied was still there, and the old blanket was folded on the floor, but there was no sign of him. He's gone, Juniper whispered, her small voice in the empty space. Maisie dropped the bag and ran to the corner where Ellis used to be. She picked up the blanket and hugged it to her chest, as if she could extract some explanation from it. But he didn't say goodbye, she protested, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Juniper approached slowly. Maybe he managed to break free completely. The two observed the ropes lying on the floor. They were cut, not untied. Someone had used something sharp to cut them. "Do you think the bad people took him again?" Maisie asked, fear evident in her big eyes. Juniper shook her head. "No, look, he folded the blanket. If it were bad people, they wouldn't care about that." The twins searched the basement, looking for any sign, any message Ellis might have left, but there was nothing but the folded blanket. "Will he come back?" Maisie asked, sitting on the last step of the stairs. Juniper sat beside her sister. The piece of cake, forgotten in the bag, no longer seemed so special. "I don't know," she answered honestly. They stayed there for a long time, two small figures in the empty basement, absorbing the absence of someone who, in just 2 weeks, had become important to them. They didn't cry. 5-year-old children rarely understand the permanence of losses. But they felt a strange emptiness, as if a space within them that they didn't know existed was now unoccupied. When they finally left the basement, they took the blanket with them. It was the only proof that Ellis had been real, not a character from the stories they invented. The following days were strange. The twins continued to wake up early, as if they still had an important mission. They kept looking at the door as if expecting someone to knock. They divided the food into 3 parts out of habit before realizing they only needed 2. They returned to the basement several times, always hoping to find Ellis there, always leaving with the same heaviness in their chest when they saw the empty space. "Maybe he went home," Juniper suggested one night as they prepared for bed. "Does he have a home?" Maisie asked. The two realized they knew almost nothing about Ellis. They didn't know where he lived, if he had family, what he did before being tied up in the basement. They had spent hours telling him about their lives, but never asked about his. On the 3rd morning after his disappearance, Nina found her daughters sitting on the porch looking at the empty street. They weren't playing, they weren't talking, just looking. "And what are you doing, girls?" she asked, sitting between them. "Nothing," Maisie replied. "Just looking," Juniper added. Nina put her arms around the two. "You seem sad." The twins didn't answer immediately. How could they explain the emptiness they felt without revealing the secret they had kept for weeks? "We lost something," Juniper finally said. "Show us something beautiful," Maisie added. Nina hugged her daughters tightly. "We can look together. What was it?" Juniper looked at her sister. A silent understanding passed between them. "You can't find it," Maisie said. "It's not something you find." Nina frowned, confused. "What does that mean, honey?" "It's like when you see a beautiful bird and it flies away," Juniper tried to explain. "You can't bring it back." "Oh," Nina said, nodding slowly. "You're talking about a feeling." "That's right," Maisie agreed, relieved not to have to lie anymore. Nina kissed the tops of her daughters' heads. "Sometimes we lose beautiful things, but other beautiful things appear. That's how it works." The girls nodded, though they weren't entirely convinced. How could anything replace the mornings in the dark basement, the shared stories, the feeling of making a difference in someone's life? Life went on. Nina still looked for work. The bills still piled up. The house still needed repairs. The twins still helped as they could, still looked for food, still pretended not to notice when their mother skipped meals so they could eat. But something had changed. They observed more. They noticed things they had ignored before, like their mother's calloused hands, Mr. Joe's tired look when he gave them ripe fruit, the way the sun hit the dirty windows of the house. A week later, Nina found the old blanket under the girls' bed. "I thought we had thrown this away," she commented. "No," Maisie exclaimed, snatching the blanket from her mother's hands. "It's important." Nina looked at her daughters with curiosity. "Why?" "Because," Juniper began but couldn't finish. "Because it's warm," Maisie completed, hugging the worn fabric. Nina didn't insist. She had learned that children sometimes valued things that adults considered unimportant. At night, the twins slept with the blanket over them, even on warm days. It was as if somehow Ellis was still there, taking care of them as they had taken care of him. "Do you think we'll ever know what happened to him?" Juniper asked one night, her voice almost disappearing into the dark room. "Yes," Maisie replied. with the same unwavering certainty as always. "One day, he'll come back to thank us. He promised, remember?" Juniper nodded, though she knew that promises are sometimes forgotten, but it was good to believe. It was good to imagine that somewhere Ellis was free and perhaps thought of them. And so the little guardians moved forward, carrying in their hearts the story no one else knew, the story of how two 5-year-old girls, with nothing to give but crumbs and kindness, had made a difference in a stranger's life. The boardroom on the 47th floor overlooked the entire city. Ellis Granger gazed out the window as his executives discussed numbers, spreadsheets, and forecasts for the next quarter. He wore an impeccable, custom-made suit that concealed the still-present marks on his body. 3 weeks had passed since he was found, dehydrated and injured, by a search team. "Mr. Granger, we need your opinion on the acquisition." Ellis turned his attention to the table. 8 men and women in expensive suits stared at him, waiting. For a moment, he felt as if he were on another planet, as if these people spoke a language he no longer understood. "We need more information," he finally said. "Joyce, I won't make hasty decisions." His assistant, Mark Chark, looked concerned. Ellis wasn't known for delaying decisions. Before the kidnapping, he was famous for his ability to analyze situations quickly and take the right path. "We'll continue tomorrow," Ellis said, standing up. "I need to review some documents." No one questioned him. The corporate world had learned to treat Ellis Granger as if he were made of glass since his return. The man who disappeared for almost a month and survived a brutal kidnapping deserved space, everyone said. In the elevator, alone, Ellis loosened his tie. The doctors assured him he was physically recovered, but something inside him had changed. It wasn't just the trauma of the kidnapping, it was something deeper, as if his values and priorities had been forcibly reorganized. In his private office, Ellis closed the door and sat in the leather chair. On the table, among financial reports and contracts, was a folded piece of paper. He picked it up carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. It was a simple pencil drawing of 2 girls holding hands. He had asked a company artist to draw it based on his description. 2 identical girls, brown hair, large eyes. Juniper with a small mark near her ear, Maisie with the more determined gaze. The little guardians who had maintained his sanity and his life during the worst days. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Granger, Detective Stevens is on the line." Ellis picked up the phone immediately. "Stevens, any news?" "Not yet, Mr. Granger. It's a large area, and we're checking all the small blue houses within a 10-kilometer radius of the abandoned market. We don't have much information to work with." Ellis sighed. "Keep looking." Single mother Nina, 2 5-year-old twin daughters, Juniper and Maisie, small blue house, precarious financial situation. "We're doing our best, sir, but without a last name or more details. I know. Keep me informed." Ellis hung up and turned his chair to the window. Below, the city stretched out like a map of lights and shadows. Somewhere in that immensity of buildings and houses were 2 girls who had no idea how much they meant to him. "Ellis, you need to rest." Sarah, his older sister, had come to visit him in his apartment. Since the rescue, she had appeared almost every day, as if she feared he would disappear again if she wasn't vigilant. "But I'm fine," Ellis replied, stirring his food without really eating. "No, you're not. You barely sleep, barely eat. The doctors said—" "The doctors don't understand," Ellis interrupted. "It's not about the physical injuries. It's about—" He stopped, unable to explain. How could he say he missed a dark, cold basement? How to explain that the only hours of peace he felt in recent days were when he recalled the visits of 2 unknown children? "It's about what?" Sarah asked softly. Ellis put his fork on the table. "While I was there, tied up in that basement, 2 little girls found me. They were about 5 years old, twins. They lived in terrible conditions, and Sarah. Unemployed mother, not enough food." Sarah nodded. She had heard this story many times since the rescue. "They shared the little they had with me," Ellis continued, "not out of pity, not for recognition, but out of pure kindness, without ulterior motives." "And you want to find them to thank them?" "I understand, Ellis." "No, you don't understand." Ellis stood up, walking to the window, his refuge when he felt cornered. It's not just about thanking them, it's about balance. My world has been out of balance since I came back. Sarah watched her brother with concern. The doctors had mentioned the possibility of post-traumatic stress, of temporary fixations as a defense mechanism. What do you mean by imbalance? Ellis gestured to the luxurious apartment around them. All of this, my life, before, it seemed so important. The acquisitions, the profits, the board meetings. Now it seems empty. It's normal to feel that way after what you've been through. That's not it. Ellis picked up a folder from the coffee table and opened it. Inside were reports, photographs of an abandoned market, city maps with circled areas. Those girls had nothing, Sarah, literally nothing, and yet they gave everything they could to a stranger. Sarah sighed. Ellis, you're already doing a lot. You've donated to charities, created social assistance programs in the company. It's not about charity, Ellis exclaimed, louder than he intended. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Sorry, it's not about making donations or feeling better. It's about finding them. Specifically them. Why? The simple question caught him off guard. Ellis looked at his sister, searching for the right words. Because they saved me when no one else could, not just by keeping me alive with water and food, but by giving me hope, humanity. In the darkest moment of my life, they were pure light. How can I move forward knowing they continue to live in that poverty, afraid of being evicted, without enough food? Sarah stood up and hugged her brother. Then let's find them. Together. The next morning, Ellis arrived at the office earlier than usual. The security team was still surprised by his new habit of arriving before everyone else, but no one commented. The kidnapping had changed many things about Ellis Granger. Mr. Granger, the report you asked for is on your desk, his new secretary informed him as he passed. Thank you, Rachel. The report in question had nothing to do with Granger Enterprises' business. It was a detailed analysis of the socio-economic conditions in the region where Ellis had been held captive. As he read, a name caught his attention. St. Clara Community Center, located 8 blocks from the abandoned market. It offered assistance to low-income families, including a small food bank. Ellis picked up the phone. Rachel, cancel my morning meetings and call my driver. 30 minutes later, Ellis stood before a simple building with a faded sign. The St. Clara Community Center was smaller than he expected, just an old building with 2 main rooms and a small courtyard. A middle-aged woman greeted him at the entrance. Can I help you? Ellis realized he was out of place there, with his expensive suit and Italian shoes. I hope so. My name is Ellis Granger. I'm looking for information about a specific family. The woman assessed him with her gaze. Mr. Granger, from Granger Enterprises. What brings you here? It's personal, Ellis replied. I'm looking for a woman named Nina, a single mother with 2 5-year-old twin daughters, Juniper and Maisie. They live in a small blue house not far from here. The woman's suspicion increased. And why would a man like you be looking for such a family? Ellis hesitated. His story had been in the papers, the businessman kidnapped for almost a month, but few knew the details about his rescue. During my kidnapping, he said softly, 2 little girls found me. They helped me when I had no hope left. I just want to thank them and reciprocate in some way. The woman's expression softened. I understand, but I can't just provide information about the families we serve. Of course, I respect that. Ellis pulled a card from his pocket. Could you at least check if you know the family I described? If they come here, could you give them my contact? The woman took the card, still hesitant. We have several families in similar situations, Mr. Granger, single mothers with young children. But twins, Juniper and Maisie, brown hair, big eyes, one of them with a small birthmark near her ear. Something flashed across the woman's face, a flicker of recognition. Perhaps I know a family like that, she said slowly, but I cannot confirm or provide details. Ellis felt his heart quicken. Please, it's important. The woman sighed. What I can do is keep your card. If I find the family you're looking for, I'll pass your contact to them. It's up to them to decide if they want to speak with you." It was better than nothing. Ellis thanked her and left the community center with a mixture of frustration and hope. The following week, Ellis attended a meeting with key shareholders. Everyone noticed the difference in his behavior. The man who once dominated the room with his presence now seemed distant, as if his mind were elsewhere. "We will begin the expansion project next quarter," Ellis concluded, closing his presentation without the usual enthusiasm. One of the oldest shareholders, Samuel Davis, stayed behind when the others left. "Ellis, can we talk?" Ellis nodded, putting away his documents. "Of course, Sam." "Any problem with the presentation?" "It's not about the presentation." The older man sat in the chair next to him. "It's about you. We're all concerned." Ellis closed his eyes for a moment. He was tired of the worries, the careful questions, the looks of pity. "I'm fine, Sam. I just need time." "It's more than that. You're different, distant, as if you're only physically here." Ellis looked at the man he had known since childhood, his father's friend. "Have you ever wondered, Sam, if all this is worth it?" He gestured to the boardroom, to the charts that showed rising profits. "If there's something more important," Sam frowned. "Of course, family, friends, health." "No," Ellis shook his head. "Something more, something we can't buy or own." "Like what?" Ellis thought of the twins, the purity of their gestures, the simplicity of their kindness. "Humanity," he finally replied. "Real connection, without hidden agendas, without expectations." Sam sighed. "Ellis, maybe you should take some time off. Truly rest." "I can't, not yet." Ellis stood up. "There's something I need to do first." Detective Stevens called late that afternoon. "Mr. Granger, I have information." Ellis, who was reviewing contracts without really reading them, felt his heart quicken. "Did you find them?" "Not exactly yet, but we're close. We cross-referenced the blue houses with social assistance records. We found 3 possible matches for single mothers named Nina, with twin daughters." 3? Ellis was already grabbing his coat. "Where?" "I'll send the addresses, but Mr. Granger, we haven't confirmed which one." "It doesn't matter. I'll see all 3. Ellis hung up and quickly left the office, ignoring Rachel's questions. In the elevator, his phone rang again. "Mr. Granger," Stevens said. "I received a call from the St. Clara Community Center. The director, Sandra Ortiz, said she knows the family we're looking for." Ellis leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly feeling weak in the knees. "Did she confirm? Is it them?" "Yes." The woman didn't want to give the full address, but she confirmed that it's Nina Alvarez and her 5-year-old twin daughters, Juniper and Maisie. They live in a small blue house on Maple Street, number 247. "Maple Street, 247, Ellis repeated, memorizing the address. "Thank you, Stevens. You can close the investigation." In the car, Ellis looked at the map. Maple Street was less than 20 minutes away, in an old part of town. His first impulse was to drive straight there, knock on the door, and finally thank the girls who hadn't left his thoughts. But something made him stop. He looked at himself, the expensive suit, the luxury car. What would it be like for Nina to see a rich stranger appear at her door, asking about her daughters? "No," he said to himself. "I need to do this right." He drove home, his mind working quickly. He needed a plan, an approach that wouldn't scare the family. He couldn't just show up at their door unannounced. In his apartment, he sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. He wrote and crossed out several ideas, searching for the right way to approach them. Finally, he looked at the phone. "Sandra," he murmured, "she can help." He called the community center, but it was already closed. He would have to wait until tomorrow. Ellis spent the night restless, pacing back and forth in the spacious apartment that now seemed like a luxury prison. So close, after weeks of searching. So close to closing the circle, to finding the girls who had given meaning to his suffering. For the first time since he was rescued, Ellis felt something other than emptiness or anxiety. He felt hope. Tomorrow, with Sandra's help, he would find a way to approach the family. Tomorrow, he could finally thank his little guardians. Sitting by the window, watching the city lights, Ellis imagined what the meeting would be like, what he would say to Nina, to Juniper, to Maisie, how he would explain how much they meant to him, how they had changed his worldview. "Tomorrow," he whispered to the night. "Tomorrow my true recovery begins." Nina looked at the stack of bills on the kitchen table. The eviction notice, now with a large red final warning stamp, seemed to scream at her. There were only 3 days left until the deadline, 3 days before they had to leave the only home the girls had ever known. The afternoon sun streamed through the broken windows, creating patterns on the worn floor. Nina had just returned from another failed job interview. "We don't have openings at the moment, but we'll keep your resume on file." The phrase she already knew by heart. Juniper and Maisie were playing in the small backyard, their voices reaching the kitchen. In recent days, they seemed more animated, more energetic. Nina didn't understand why. How could they be so happy when everything around them was falling apart? The sound of a car stopping in front of the house caught her attention. It wasn't common for them to receive visitors, much less expensive cars on that street of humble homes. Nina looked through the window and saw a man get out of an elegant black sedan. He wore dark pants and a light-colored shirt, simple but visibly of quality. He carried a small package in his hands. Who could that be?" Nina murmured to herself. "The bill collector. But he usually came in an old pickup truck. The landlord, but he always gave notice beforehand." The doorbell rang, a harsh, broken sound that only half worked. Nina took a deep breath, smoothed her disheveled hair, and adjusted her worn t-shirt before answering. The man at the door was tall, with dark hair and intense eyes. There was something about his face, a recent scar near his temple, and an expression Nina couldn't decipher. It wasn't arrogance, as she would expect from someone so prosperous-looking. It was something more vulnerable. "Can I help you?" Nina asked, keeping the door partially closed, a protective habit. The man smiled slightly. "Good afternoon, you must be Nina. My name is Ellis Granger. I came to say thank you." Nina frowned. "Thank you. I think there must be some mistake. We don't know each other." "Not directly," Ellis replied, "but your daughters and I know each other." Before Nina could ask what he meant, a shout came from the backyard. Juniper and Maisie had come around the house and were now standing on the small driveway, looking at the visitor with wide eyes. "Ellis!" Maisie shouted, her face lighting up as Nina rarely saw. "You came!" exclaimed Juniper, usually the quieter of the two. To Nina's complete astonishment, her daughters ran towards the stranger, hugging his legs tightly. Even more surprising was the man's reaction. He knelt down and hugged the girls with a mixture of emotion and relief, as if reuniting with loved ones after a long separation. "You've grown," he said, his voice choked. Maisie giggled. "It's only been a month." "Even so," Ellis smiled, looking from one to the other. "How are you doing?" Nina remained frozen in the doorway, confused and alarmed. "What's going on? How do you know my daughters?" Ellis stood up, the girls still clinging to him. "Ms. Alvarez, I know this must seem strange. Can we talk? I have a lot to explain." Nina hesitated. In any other circumstance, she would have sent the stranger away immediately. But her daughter's reaction left her speechless. She had never seen them so happy to see anyone. "Mom, let him in," Maisie pleaded. "It's Ellis, the one we helped." "Helped?" Nina repeated, growing more confused. "Please," Ellis insisted, his tone respectful. "I promise to explain everything." Nina opened the door wider, allowing them to enter. She felt uncomfortable welcoming someone so well dressed into her simple home, with old furniture and peeling walls. "Sit down," she said, indicating the worn sofa in the small living room. "Girls, go wash your hands." "But, Mom," Juniper began. "Now," Nina said firmly. When the girls left, she turned to Ellis. "Omas, who are you, and how do you know my daughters?" Ellis placed the package he had brought on the coffee table. "Ms. Alvarez, my name is Ellis Granger. About a month ago, I was kidnapped and held captive in the basement of an abandoned market not far from here." Nina's eyes widened. "The Donahue market, the closed one?" Ellis nodded. "Your daughters found me there. For almost 2 weeks, they came every day, bringing water, food, even a blanket. They literally saved my life." Nina slowly sat down in the opposite chair, the pieces starting to click into place. The girls' morning outings. The old blanket that suddenly became so important to them. The inexplicable sadness they felt for days. That's... Nina shook her head, incredulous. They're only 5 years old. How could they... I know it seems impossible, Ellis said softly. But it's true. Without them, I wouldn't have survived until I was found. The girls ran back into the living room, their eyes shining with excitement. They sat on either side of Ellis, as if they feared he would disappear again. Why didn't you ever tell me? Nina asked, looking at her daughters. He asked us to keep it a secret, Juniper explained, looking at the floor. He said it was dangerous. The people who held me were dangerous, Ellis confirmed. I feared for their safety if anyone found out. Nina looked at the man, now noticing the subtle signs of someone who had been through something traumatic. The way his eyes occasionally checked the exits, the slight tremor in his hands. So, Nina began, trying to absorb everything. My daughters found you tied up in a basement and, instead of telling me or calling the police, decided to take care of you themselves. Ellis smiled slightly. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But in their simplicity, they did exactly what I needed. Water, food, companionship, hope. You didn't have water, Nina asked, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. Tayasu, Ellis replied. The kidnappers deprived me of water for days as a form of torture. Nina covered her mouth with her hand, looking at her daughters with new understanding. They, who barely had enough for themselves, had shared the little they possessed with a stranger in need. Did you say Ellis Granger? Nina asked, suddenly recognizing the name. From Granger Enterprises. You're that businessman who disappeared. It was in the papers. Ellis nodded. Yes, I was kidnapped for reasons that don't matter now. The important thing is that your daughters kept me alive and sane until the search team found me. Ellis is better now, Maisie said, proud. See, Mum. The injuries are gone. Almost all of them, Ellis corrected, lightly touching the scar on his temple. Nina looked at her daughters with a mixture of pride and shock. Why didn't you tell me after he left? Juniper shrugged. We promised not to tell anyone. Even me. Especially you, Maisie replied. You would have worried. Nina closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by it all. Her small daughters, visiting an abandoned market every morning to take care of a kidnapped man, the dangers they could have faced, but also the courage and kindness they showed. Miss Alvarez, Ellis said, bringing her back to the present. I've been looking for you since I was rescued. I wanted to thank you properly for what your daughters did for me. There's no need, Nina began. Yes, there is, Ellis gently interrupted. In fact, that's why I'm here today. He picked up the package he had brought and handed it to Nina. She opened it hesitantly, finding documents inside. As she examined them, her eyes widened in shock. This is, she choked, unable to finish the sentence. The deed to a house, Ellis confirmed, at Roosevelt Avenue, number 38. 3 bedrooms, a garden, fully furnished and ready for you to move in whenever you wish. It's in your name. Nina looked at him, astonished. I can't accept this. It's too much. There's more, Ellis continued, pointing to another document. I opened accounts for Juniper and Maisie. The funds are secure until they turn 18, but they cover all their education and guarantee a stable start to adult life. Mr. Granger, Ellis, please. Ellis, Nina corrected, her voice trembling. This is too generous, but I can't accept all this. My daughters just did what any decent person would do. Ellis shook his head. No, Ms. Alvarez, what your daughters did was not common. In a world where adults passed by that market every day without noticing anything, 2 small children not only saw me but decided to help, without asking for anything in return, without telling anyone for recognition. That is extraordinary. The girls looked from their mother to Ellis, not fully understanding what was happening, but feeling the importance of the moment. We're getting a new house, Juniper asked, her eyes shining. A big house, Ellis confirmed, smiling at her. With a room just for the 2 of you and a garden where you can play. With a swing? Maisie wanted to know. We can install one, Ellis replied, chuckling softly at the simplicity of the request. Nina still held the documents, unable to fully process what was happening. "I don't know what to say." "There's one more thing," Ellis said. "I know you're looking for a job. I have a chain of hotels as part of my family's businesses. I'd like to offer you a management position at the Granger Plaza Hotel. The salary is excellent, and the hours would allow you to be home when the girls return from school." Nina blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. "Why? Why do all this?" Ellis looked at the twins, who were now fascinated by the photos of the new house included in the package. "When I was in that basement," he said softly, "I lost faith in humanity. The people I trusted betrayed me in the worst possible way. I was ready to give up when your daughters appeared. 2 children who barely had enough for themselves, but who shared everything with me. No questions, no judgments, no expectations." Ellis paused, visibly emotional. "They gave me more than water and food, Ms. Alvarez. They gave me hope. They showed me that genuine kindness still exists in the world. How can I put a price on that?" Nina looked at her daughters, seeing them now through Ellis's eyes, not just as small, vulnerable children, but as human beings capable of deep compassion. "Even so," she said, "it's too much. We could accept more modest help." Ellis smiled, understanding her concern. "It's not charity, if that's what worries you. Consider it an investment in 2 extraordinary girls who will one day do incredible things in the world, and in a mother who raised daughters with such big hearts, even in the most difficult circumstances." Nina swallowed hard, looking at the documents again. A home of their own, guaranteed education for the girls, a stable, well-paying job. Everything she had dreamed of giving her daughters, but which seemed impossible just an hour ago. "I don't know if I can." Ellis leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Ms. Alvarez, Nina, I know it's hard to accept. I know your pride tells you to refuse, but think about the girls, think about their future." Maisie tugged on her mother's shirt sleeve. Can we go see the new house, Mom, please?" Nina looked at her daughters, their faces hopeful, and then at Ellis. "I need to think. It's all so sudden." Ellis nodded, understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. "My personal number. Call when you decide, or if you have any questions." He stood up to leave, but Juniper held his hand. "Are you going away again?" Ellis knelt in front of her. "Only for now. But now I know where to find you, and you know how to find me. I won't disappear again." Nina walked Ellis to the door, still dazed by everything that had happened. "Mr. Ellis," she said when they reached the entrance, "I understand your gratitude, but this still seems—" She made a vague gesture, unable to find the words. Ellis looked at the simple house, noticing the cracks in the walls, the broken roof tiles, the signs of a daily struggle for survival. "When I was in that basement," he said, "your daughters told me about this house. About the leaking roof, the broken heater, the constant fear of eviction. They didn't complain, they just stated facts, and yet they shared the little they had with me." He looked directly into Nina's eyes. "You saved me. Now it's my turn." Nina stood motionless at the door, watching Ellis get into the car and drive away. Inside the house, Juniper and Maisie talked excitedly about the new house, about the garden, about the swing they would have. Nina looked at the documents in her hands, at the card with Ellis Granger's personal number, and then at the blue sky above. For the first time in years, she felt something she had forgotten how to feel: hope. The moving truck pulled up in front of 38 Roosevelt Avenue. It was a 2-story house with cream-colored walls and large windows. A well-kept garden surrounded the entrance, with colorful flowers and a stone path leading to the front door. Nina got out of the taxi that had brought them, still incredulous. Juniper and Maisie jumped out right behind her, running onto the green lawn. "Is it really ours?" Juniper asked, looking at her mother with wide eyes. Nina nodded, holding the keys tightly, as if she feared everything would disappear if she let go. "It's ours." It had been only 2 weeks since Ellis's unexpected visit. 2 weeks of conversations, planning, signed papers, and moving preparations. 2 weeks in which Nina oscillated between overwhelming gratitude and the fear of accepting such a big change. "Let's go in," Maisie exclaimed, pulling her mother's hand. Nina opened the front door and the three entered together. The living room was spacious, with new, comfortable furniture. A large window let in the sunlight, creating golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. "It's so big," Juniper whispered, slowly circling. The movers began bringing in the few boxes containing their belongings. They didn't have much from their old life. Some clothes, a few mended toys and family photos. The rest, the furniture, the utensils, the beds, everything was new, chosen by Ellis with the help of an interior designer. Nina walked to the kitchen and stopped at the entrance. It was large, with white cabinets, new appliances, and an island in the center. A large refrigerator hummed softly, so different from the noisy old half-working one. She opened it and found enough food for weeks. "Look, Mom!" Maisie shouted from the backyard. "There's a swing set!" Nina went to the back door. In the backyard, under the shade of a large tree, there was a swing set and a slide. The girls were already running towards it, their laughter echoing in the morning air. "He thought of everything," Nina murmured to herself. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of discoveries. The girls explored every corner of the new house, from the clean, dry basement to the well-lit attic. They found their bedrooms, a spacious area they would share, with 2 identical beds, bookshelves, and a box full of new toys. Nina slowly unpacked, placing the few mementos from their old life in prominent places. A photo of her with the girls when they were babies, the old blanket the twins insisted on bringing, the same one they had taken to Ellis in the basement. That night, the three sat at the kitchen table for dinner. Nina had cooked with ingredients she could never have afforded before. The twins ate with enthusiasm, their faces lit up by a happiness Nina hadn't seen in a long time. "Tomorrow's your first day at work, Mum?" Juniper asked between bites. Nina nodded. "Yes, at the Granger Plaza Hotel, downtown." "Can we visit you there?" Maisie wanted to know. "Of course. One day I'll show you everything." After dinner, Nina bathed the girls in the large tub, another luxury they never had. As they played with the bubbles, Nina watched their faces, looking for signs of change. But she found the same Juniper and Maisie as always, perhaps a little more flushed, more relaxed, but with the same sparkle in their eyes, the same silent connection between them. When she put them to bed, new beds with soft sheets, Nina sat between them for the bedtime story, as they always did. "No more leaks here, right?" Juniper asked, looking at the perfectly white ceiling. "No," Nina replied. "No more cold in winter either." "No more lack of food," Maisie added. Nina kissed each of their foreheads. "No more lack of food." When the girls finally fell asleep, Nina went to the front porch with a cup of tea. She sat in the rocking chair and watched the quiet street. The neighboring houses were well kept, with beautiful gardens and cars in the driveways, a completely different world from what they had known. The phone rang, another luxury, no longer having to rely solely on the old cell phone with limited credit. It was Ellis. "How was the first day?" he asked. "That feels like a dream," Nina replied honestly. "The girls are enchanted." "And you?" Nina hesitated. "I'm still getting used to the idea that this is real." "It's real," Ellis assured her, "and deserved." "I'm nervous about tomorrow," Nina confessed. "I've never worked in a hotel before." "You'll do great. The team is ready to help you learn everything you need." When she hung up, Nina stayed on the porch for a while longer, soaking in the tranquility of the night. It seemed impossible that just 2 weeks ago she was staring at an eviction notice, counting coins to buy bread. The next morning, Nina woke up before the alarm. She put on the navy blue suit Ellis had provided for her first day of work. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman reflected. Neatly styled hair, elegant clothes, a more upright posture. The girls woke up as she was finishing breakfast. "You look pretty, Mom," Juniper said, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "You look like a queen," Maisie added. Nina smiled, serving cereal for the two. "Mrs. Thompson will come to stay with you while I'm at work. She's our next-door neighbor on the right." "Can we play in the garden?" Maisie asked. "Of course, just be polite and obey Mrs. Thompson." The Granger Plaza Hotel was a 20-minute drive away. A chauffeur picked her up, another arrangement by Ellis to facilitate her adjustment. At the hotel's imposing entrance, Nina felt a flutter in her stomach. The lobby was spacious, with marble floors and elegant staff moving efficiently. The general manager, Mr. Patterson, greeted her personally. "Welcome, Ms. Alvarez. We were eager to meet you." The first hours were for orientation, getting to know the hotel, the departments, the responsibilities of the position she would hold. Nina absorbed everything with intense attention, determined not to disappoint the trust placed in her. At lunch, sitting in the staff cafeteria, Nina checked her phone. There was a message from Mrs. Thompson with a photo of the girls playing on the swing, wide smiles on their faces. Something settled inside her. They would be fine. Everyone would be fine. Days turned into weeks. A new rhythm settled into the family's life. Nina went to work every morning, growing more confident in her abilities. The girls started attending a nearby school, making new friends, learning new things. On Sundays, the three explored the neighborhood, discovering parks, libraries, ice cream parlors. Sometimes, Ellis joined them on these outings, an increasingly constant presence in their lives. One afternoon, Nina found the girls sitting on the porch step, dividing a sandwich into 3 carefully equal parts. "What are you doing?" she asked, curious. "There's more in the fridge, you know." Juniper shrugged. "It's just a game of ours." Nina understood. Some things didn't change. The connection between the twins, the instinct to share, the silent memory of harder days. That night, as she tucked them into bed, Maisie asked a question Nina didn't expect. "Do you think we were happier before or now?" Nina thought for a moment. "I think we were happy before, in our own way. And now we're happy in another way. Easier," Juniper added. "Yes," Nina agreed. "Easier." She turned off the light, but stayed at the door, watching her daughters. The little guardians who, with a gesture of kindness, had changed not only one man's life, but their own too. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. But inside that house on Roosevelt Avenue, life had found a new melody, softer, gentler, with the promise of even better days to come. Ellis woke up with a start, his entire body soaked in sweat. For a moment, he felt disoriented, the bedroom walls seeming to close in around him. His eyes frantically searched for the small window that let in a sliver of light into the basement, but there was no basement. He was in his luxurious apartment, in the soft covers of his king-size bed. "It was just a dream," he murmured to himself, running his hands over his face. The same dream as always, the ropes tightening around his wrists, the unbearable thirst, the silence broken only by the distant sound of footsteps above him. The digital clock on the bedside table read 3:17 a.m. Ellis knew he wouldn't be able to go back to sleep. He got up, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. Since the kidnapping, he kept water bottles in every room of the apartment. The fear of being thirsty again constantly haunted him. In the large living room window, he watched the city lights. A few weeks had passed since he found Nina and the twins, since he provided the new house and the job. Helping them brought a sense of purpose, something to distract him from the memories that haunted him. But at night, when he was alone, the memories returned with full force. His phone rang, making him jump. Even a simple ring made him alert now. "Granger," he answered, recognizing Detective Lawrence's number. "Mr. Granger, I'm sorry for the hour," said the voice on the other end, "but I thought you'd want to know immediately. We have a partial match for the fingerprints found at the market." Ellis felt a chill run down his spine. "Whose?" "It's not conclusive yet. It belongs to a man named Victor Mendez. He has a record for minor crimes, mainly theft and receiving stolen goods. Never direct violence." "I've never heard of him," Ellis said, frowning. "Probably a contractor," Lawrence explained. "Someone paid to do the dirty work. We're trying to locate him for questioning." Ellis hung up after getting a few more details. Victor Mendez. A name that meant nothing to him. But that could be the first concrete lead to unraveling who was behind his kidnapping. He sat on the sofa, suddenly exhausted, but knowing that sleep wouldn't come. He picked up the remote and turned on the television, just to have some background noise. The complete silence bothered him now. It reminded him too much of the long hours in the basement, when the only sound was his own breathing. "You look tired," Sarah commented when she met him for lunch the next day. Ellis shrugged, taking a sip of coffee. It was his third of the morning, an attempt to combat the sleepless night. "Nightmares again?" she asked, concern evident on her face. "Lawrence called in the middle of the night," Ellis deflected. "They found fingerprints belonging to a man named Victor Mendez at the market." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's good, isn't it? A breakthrough in the investigation. Maybe. He's just a pawn, it seems. Someone hired for the job." The waitress brought their dishes. Ellis barely touched his food, just pushing it around with his fork. "Ellis," Sarah began, her voice soft. "You need help. A therapist. Someone to talk to about what you went through." "I'm dealing with it my way," he replied, more harshly than he intended. "No, you're not, and you know it. You barely sleep, barely eat. You're obsessed with the investigation, and what else should I do?" Ellis interrupted. "Pretend nothing happened. Go back to my normal life while whoever did this to me remains free." Sarah sighed. "That's not what I'm saying. I just think you need to take care of yourself too." Ellis knew his sister was right, but the idea of talking about his experience with a stranger seemed impossible. How could he explain the terror of being completely helpless, the humiliation of begging for water, the dark thoughts that visited him in the darkest hours when he believed he would die in that forgotten basement? "How are Nina and the girls?" Sarah asked, changing the subject. Ellis's face softened immediately. "Good. Nina's adjusting to the hotel job. The girls are happy in the new house. Do you visit them often?" "A few times a week. I take the girls to the park, help them adapt to the new neighborhood." Sarah smiled. "They're good for you. When you talk about them, you seem lighter." Ellis nodded. It was true. The only hours he truly felt at peace were those spent with Juniper and Maisie. Their simplicity, the pure joy they showed with small things, an ice cream, a walk in the park, a bedtime story, reminded him that there was still beauty in the world. "I'm visiting them this afternoon," Ellis said. "I promised to bring a board game they wanted to try." Sarah squeezed her brother's hand across the table. "That's good. They're helping you heal, as much as you helped them." At the Roosevelt Avenue house, Ellis parked his car and picked up the package from the passenger seat. Before he even rang the doorbell, the door opened and two small figures ran towards him. "Ellis!" Juniper and Maisie shouted in unison, hugging his legs. "Hello, little guardians," he smiled, crouching down to hug them properly. "I brought the game I promised." Nina appeared at the door, smiling at the scene. Ellis noticed that she looked different, more relaxed, more confident. The new job and stability were clearly doing her good. "Come in," she invited. "I just made lemonade." Inside the house, Ellis sat at the kitchen table with the girls, opening the game and explaining the rules. It was a simple board game with colorful cards, suitable for their age. Soon they were laughing and competing cheerfully. Nina watched from the counter, preparing a snack. "They waited all day for you," she commented. Ellis smiled, his chest warming. "I'm glad I didn't disappoint." As the girls played intently, Nina approached Ellis. "You look tired," she said softly, so the children wouldn't hear. Ellis shrugged. "Rough nights." Nina nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. "The girls also had nightmares after you disappeared from the basement. They worried, wondering if the bad people had taken you again." "I'm sorry for that," Ellis said, looking at the twins who were now celebrating some successful move. "Don't apologize. They're fine now. And you?" The question caught Ellis by surprise. He was so used to pretending he was fine, to reassuring others, that for a moment he didn't know how to answer honestly. "I'm coping," he finally said. "The police found fingerprints at the market. Maybe we're close to finding out who did this." Nina lightly touched his arm. "That's good, but that's not what I asked." Before Ellis could answer, his phone rang. It was Lawrence again. "I need to take this," he said, standing up and going to the porch. "Mr. Granger," Lawrence said bluntly, "we found Mendez. He confessed to being hired for the kidnapping, but says he doesn't know who's behind it. Someone contacted him anonymously, paid cash." "He must know more," Ellis insisted. "I need to talk to him." "That wouldn't be appropriate, sir. The investigation needs to follow protocols." Ellis ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. How long have we been on this investigation, Lawrence? 3 months, and only now do we have a name, which isn't even the masterminds. I understand your frustration, Mr. Granger, but we're making progress. Mendez gave us a description of an intermediary. We're creating a composite sketch. When he hung up, Ellis noticed his hands trembling. He was so close, and yet so far from discovering the truth. He took several deep breaths, trying to calm himself before going back inside. In the kitchen, the girls had finished the game and were now drawing on colored paper. Nina was preparing dinner. "Stay for dinner," she invited. "So nothing fancy, but the girls would be happy." Ellis hesitated. He wanted to go back to the office, pressure Lawrence for more information, do something, anything, to advance the investigation. But looking at Juniper and Maisie, he felt the tension ease a little. "I'd love to," he replied. During dinner, the girls dominated the conversation with stories from school, new friends they were making, and things they were learning. Ellis listened attentively to every word, asking questions, genuinely engaging in their small stories. Maisie defended a boy who was being teased, Juniper said, proud of her sister. "He was crying," Maisie explained, "as if it were the most obvious thing in the world to help someone in difficulty. I couldn't leave him alone." Ellis smiled, recognizing in those simple words the same spirit that had saved him in the dark basement. They were still the same, even in completely different circumstances. Later, after the girls had gone to sleep, Ellis helped Nina wash the dishes. "They're special," he commented. "They always have been," Nina agreed. "Even when we had almost nothing, they found ways to help others, always sharing, always concerned about those worse off than us." Ellis was silent for a moment, absorbing those words. "I guess that's why I can't move on," he finally admitted. "I can't understand how someone could do what they did to me. What's the purpose of so much hate?" Nina dried her hands on the dish towel. "Maybe there's no answer that makes sense, Ellis. Some people just do terrible things." "I need to know who," he insisted. "I need to look into the eyes of whoever ordered that and understand why." "What if the answer doesn't bring peace?" Nina asked softly. "What if it only brings more pain?" Ellis had no answer for that. Part of him knew she might be right, that discovering the truth could open even deeper wounds. But another part desperately needed answers, a face to put on his nightmares. When he said goodbye, promising to return on the weekend, Ellis felt the weight of uncertainty on his shoulders. He drove back to the empty apartment where he knew the nightmares awaited him. The next day, he was in his office when Sarah entered without knocking. "Did you see the news?" she asked, agitated. Ellis frowned. "What news?" "Victor Mendez was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparently suicide." Ellis felt his blood run cold. Suicide? Or did someone make sure he wouldn't talk anymore? Sarah sat down, pale. "The police are investigating, but we both know what that means," Ellis completed. "Whoever is behind this has power. Enough power to reach someone inside prison." That night, Ellis couldn't sleep again. He sat in the darkness of his apartment, looking out at the city, feeling more vulnerable than ever. The only witness, the only link to whoever had orchestrated his torment, was dead. The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered, incomplete. But one certainty grew in his mind. Whoever was behind his kidnapping was someone close, someone with resources, someone who knew his routine and his movements, someone he trusted. Ellis hung up the phone and stared at the office wall. The call with the lawyer had confirmed what he already suspected. His brother, Andrew, would be formally charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming, especially after the offshore bank accounts were discovered. The world Ellis knew had crumbled. His own brother, the person he had grown up with, had planned his death for money and power. The pain of betrayal was almost physical, like a constant weight on his chest. He looked at the clock, almost 5 in the afternoon. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his coat and left the office. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the week," he told his secretary as he passed. 40 minutes later, Ellis parked in front of the house on Roosevelt Avenue. As he got out of the car, he heard laughter coming from the backyard. He walked around the house and found Juniper and Maisie playing with a garden hose, soaked and happy. "Ellis!" Maisie shouted when she saw him. Both ran towards him, dripping water everywhere. "Be careful, you'll get him wet," Nina warned, appearing at the back door. But Ellis was already kneeling, opening his arms to receive the twins' wet hug. He didn't care about his expensive suit getting soaked. In fact, he barely noticed. "We came to fix the shower," Nina explained, approaching. Fair, and somehow it turned into a water fight. Ellis smiled, watching the girls who were now jumping around him, telling him about their day at school. "Did something happen?" Nina asked softly, noticing something in his gaze. Ellis hesitated. "Can we talk after they're asleep?" Nina nodded, understanding. "Stay for dinner." "We were going to make homemade pizza." "Pizza?" the twins exclaimed in unison. "Can I help?" Ellis asked. "Of course," Nina replied, "but you might want to change those wet clothes first." Ellis looked at his soaked suit and laughed, a genuine sound he hadn't heard from himself in a long time. In the kitchen, wearing a borrowed t-shirt from a neighbor and jeans Nina had bought for emergencies, Ellis helped the girls spread tomato sauce on the dough. "No, not like that," Maisie corrected, guiding his hand. "You have to go to the edge." Juniper carefully placed slices of cheese, her tongue peeking out the corner of her mouth in concentration. Nina watched the scene, smiling as she chopped vegetables. It was the third time that week Ellis had shown up for dinner. Since the discovery about his brother, he seemed to seek refuge in their home more frequently. "Done," Juniper announced when the pizza was assembled. "It's perfect," Ellis complimented, making the girls smile proudly. During dinner, the twins dominated the conversation with stories from school, new friends they were making, and things they were learning. Ellis listened attentively to every word, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts. For a few hours, he completely forgot about his problems, the upcoming court hearings, the headlines about the Granger scandal. After baths and bedtime stories, a responsibility Ellis happily took on whenever he was present, the girls finally fell asleep. Nina found Ellis on the porch, looking at the stars with a thoughtful expression. "Do you want to talk now?" she asked, sitting in the chair next to him. Ellis took a deep breath. The police concluded the investigation. "It was my brother, Nina. Andrew planned everything." Nina's eyes widened. "Your own brother? My God, Ellis." "Apparently, he always envied me. When our father died, the will left me in control of the company. Andrew got a significant share, but not the power he wanted." Ellis shook his head. "He hired people to kidnap me, to keep me in that basement until I signed documents transferring control to him. Then I would disappear permanently." Nina covered her mouth with her hand. "That's terrible. The worst part is I never suspected. We grew up together, Nina. We were close, or at least I thought we were." "I'm so sorry," Nina said, lightly touching his arm. Ellis looked at the illuminated house behind them. "You know what's strangest? I can't feel the anger I should. I'm sad, disappointed, but not consumed by hatred. I guess I've found something more important to focus on." "The girls," Ellis smiled softly. "Them, you, this house. What you gave me is priceless, Nina." "What did we give you?" she asked, confused. "You gave us all this." "No," Ellis shook his head. "You gave me something no money can buy. A place where I can just be Ellis. Not the CEO, not the Granger heir, not the victim of a famous kidnapping. Just me." Nina smiled, understanding. "Children have that gift. They see people as they really are." "I want to be more present," Ellis said suddenly. "Not just occasional visits. I want to be part of their lives, if you allow it." Nina looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity in his gaze. They would love that, and so would I. In the following weeks, Ellis kept his promise. He reorganized his work schedule, delegated responsibilities, and made space to spend time with the family he had chosen. On Tuesdays, he took the girls to school and then picked them up. On Thursdays, he had dinner with them and helped with homework. Weekends were reserved for outings, museums, parks, movies, always attentive to what the twins wanted to explore. At the office, people noticed the change. Ellis smiled more, seemed lighter, less obsessed with numbers and contracts. He began to implement new benefits for employees with children, On-site daycare, flexible hours, education assistance. "You look different," Sarah commented during a lunch. Ellis thought for a moment. "I guess I am. What happened with Andrew could have destroyed me, could have made me bitter, distrustful. But it didn't," Sarah completed. "No," Ellis agreed, "because I have something to live for now, someone to live for." Sarah smiled, happy to see her brother finding peace after so much pain. On a particularly sunny Saturday, Ellis parked his car in front of the house on Roosevelt Avenue earlier than usual. He brought with him a special surprise. Nina opened the door, still in her sleepwear. "Ellis, we weren't expecting you so early." "Sorry to drop by like this," he smiled, "but I have a surprise for the girls. For all of you, actually." The twins ran downstairs when they heard his voice. "What is it? What is it?" Maisie asked, jumping around him. Ellis pulled 3 tickets from his pocket. "How about we spend the day at Enchanted Park?" The girls' eyes widened. Enchanted Park was the largest amusement park in the region, with roller coasters, carousels, and attractions they had only seen on television. "Really?" Juniper whispered, as if she feared it was just a joke. "Really?" Ellis confirmed. "If your mom agrees, of course." Nina looked at her daughter's hopeful faces. "So I guess we have a trip planned for today." The car ride to the park was filled with animated conversations. The twins had never been to an amusement park before and asked 1,000 questions. What was a roller coaster? Did it hurt? Did the carousel go too fast? When they finally arrived and passed through the colorful gates, Ellis watched with emotion the girls' wonder-struck faces. Their eyes tried to absorb everything at once. The lights, the colors, the music, the giant rides. "Where do we start?" Nina asked, as enchanted as her daughters. "How about the carousel?" Ellis suggested. "It's a good start." The following hours were filled with discoveries. The first carousel ride, with Juniper and Maisie waving each time around. The first kiddie roller coaster, with excited screams. The first cotton candy, leaving pink mustaches on their smiling faces. Ellis recorded every moment, every expression of surprise and joy. He bought princess hats for the girls, took photos next to costumed characters, carried them on his shoulders when they got tired of walking. Late in the afternoon, while Nina bought water for everyone, Ellis sat with the twins on a bench near the park's central plaza. "Are you enjoying it?" he asked, although the answer was obvious in their radiant faces. "It's the best day of my life," Maisie declared solemnly. "Mine too," Juniper agreed. Ellis felt a wave of emotion as he looked at these 2 girls who, unknowingly, had saved not only his life, but his capacity to love and trust. He knelt in front of them, holding one of each of their hands. "I want you to know something," he said softly. "From now on, you will have everything you ever wanted, and I will always be around." "Promise?" Juniper asked, her big eyes fixed on him. "I promise," Ellis replied with conviction. "Even when we're old ladies," Maisie insisted. Ellis laughed. "Even when you're old ladies?" Nina returned with the water bottles, catching the end of the conversation. Her eyes met Ellis's, and a silent understanding passed between them. They didn't need words to know that something special was happening there. A family being formed not by blood, but by choice and love. Weeks turned into months. Winter came and went, giving way to a vibrant spring. At the Roosevelt Avenue house, the routine now included Ellis as a permanent part. On a Sunday afternoon, Nina watched from the porch as Juniper and Maisie played in the garden. Ellis had installed a small irrigation system, and the girls discovered they could create rain by turning on the sprinklers. "They never get tired of playing with water," Ellis commented, joining Nina with 2 cups of coffee. Nina smiled, accepting the cup. "So it's new for them to have water readily available. In the old house, we saved every drop." Ellis nodded, understanding. They sat side by side, watching the girls in comfortable silence. It wasn't an empty silence, but a full one, of peace, contentment, belonging. "My lawyer called yesterday," Ellis said after a while. "Andrew accepted the plea deal. He'll plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How do you feel about that?" Nina asked. Ellis considered the question. "Peaceful, I guess. I don't want to live with anger or fear anymore. He made his choice. Now I need to move on with my life. Nina gently touched his hand, a simple gesture, yet filled with understanding. In the garden, Juniper noticed Ellis on the porch and nudged her sister. Both immediately dropped their play and ran towards him, wet and smiling. "Ellis, come see what we found," Maisie called, pulling him by the hand. Ellis smiled at Nina and allowed himself to be led by the girls to a small bush in the corner of the garden. "Look," Juniper pointed, carefully pushing aside some leaves to reveal a nest with 3 bluish eggs. "Wow," Ellis admired, kneeling down for a better look. "They're robin's eggs. We need to be careful not to scare the mother." "Can we take care of them?" Maisie asked. "The mother bird takes better care," Ellis explained. "So but we can watch from afar, see when the chicks hatch." The girls nodded solemnly, accepting the mission of watching the nest from a distance. From the porch, Nina watched the scene with a full heart. Ellis, who was once the solitary, powerful businessman, now knelt on the wet grass, patiently teaching her daughters about bird nests. When they returned to the porch, Ellis with his shirt wet from the girls' hugs, Nina felt a deep certainty. This was their family now. Not traditional, not conventional, but real and solid like the house they lived in. The girls ran back to the garden for more adventures, and Ellis sat down beside Nina again. "You know," he said, watching the twins play, "I spent my whole life believing that success meant more money, more power, more recognition. And now," Nina asked. Ellis smiled, looking at her. "Now I know it means this. Being here, belonging somewhere, loving and being loved unconditionally." Nina nodded, understanding perfectly. "They saved you. And you too," Ellis added. "We all saved each other." The girls waved from the garden, calling them to see something new they had discovered. Ellis and Nina stood together, responding to the call that had become the center of their lives. There, amidst childish laughter and hard-won peace, they all knew without needing to say it, it was love that saved them, all of them. A love that began with small hands offering water in a dark basement and now bloomed under the sun of a new shared life. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.